You got a typo there, Franklin.
Oh no, I gotta fix that.
That's right, and will be posted on the library. You can tell what I do for a living. I'm a copywriter. I'm painful to live with.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the director of the Larkspur Library, and today we're here with Marin Narlock. If people start coming into the room, just a reminder: if you do have questions today at today's workshop, either use the Q&A box at the bottom or the chat, and I'll be relaying your questions to Marin. I'll start the slideshow over again. So again, welcome to the our garden talks. I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the director of the Larkspur Library, and we're here today with Marin Narlock to talk about fire smart landscaping. Marie is a UC Master Gardener. She is an expert at this, and I'm looking forward to her presentation. So again, welcome. And next week too, we have organic fertilizer with UC Master Garden Judy Orsini. And this is made possible by the Friends of the Library. It's in partnership with the Commons Foundation and the UC Master Gardeners of Marin. Don't forget, summer reading has started. So I know all of you who are reading gardening books this summer, you can participate by playing summer reading bingo. You can download the card on our webpage. You might win some prizes too this summer. And again, follow us on our social media. We're always posting stuff. We have a lot of live events on our Facebook page, but follow us to see what's going on. We're always sharing stuff on Instagram and Twitter. And if you have to drop out of the call today, we do save these recordings and they're on our YouTube page. You can always watch it again or share it with a friend. And again, today, if you have questions, just use the Q&A box or the chat box, and I'll be relaying the questions to Marie. And again, thank you for joining us. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to you, Marie. So welcome.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much for having me today. It's really great to be able to share this information, and I think you'll find that it's a pretty practical, pretty much stuff you can start doing right away. So why don't we go ahead and just jump in and get started. Okay, today we're going to talk about how to create a beautiful fire smart landscape. But first, just a quick reminder of who the Master Gardeners are, who I am, what we do. As you can see in the blue type down here, our primary goal as representatives from the University of California is to provide research-based information on home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscape practices. And of course, fire smart landscaping falls into that. So we as Master Gardeners, we are considered experts on landscape. We are not experts on what to do with your house in terms of fire safe, making it more fire resistant. But there are some really important things you can do You can look at this list that I have here on this slide. And if you contact your local fire department, they should be able to help you how to update these things on your house. There's some really great improvements. And more than anything, know your evacuation route, right? Know that how to get out of your house, away from your house, know what your evacuation route is. Critically important. Okay, so let's start in. What are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about just a few fire facts. I promise not too many. And then we're going to talk about how to plan and maintain a fire smart landscape. Okay, here's the very simple formula for fire. Oxygen plus heat plus fuel equals fire. And we can only control one of these, and that means fuel. Fuel is the only thing we can control when it comes to avoiding fire. And here are some very clear-cut examples of an excess of fuel, right? So it's weeds that have gone nuts in a lot, a tree right up against a house, overgrown foliage, firewood stacked up near the house, etc. And we like to remind people not to be fuelish, right? We want to balance our fuel loads. We also know that the way that the majority of landscapes and homes catch on fire when the wildfire is burning nearby is from embers, right? So it's not flames coming up and licking your house and so forth. More often than not, it's the little pieces floating around in the wind or whatever from a wildfire. And these can be tiny little pieces or they can be large. I've read of some up as big as like a football, and they can travel for, a mile. They can go very far. And whenever they land on something combustible, that can ignite, that can go up into flames. We know that fire moves vertically, right? We know that wherever it lands, if it lands on a combustible surface, that the flames will rise 2 to 3 times the height of wherever it's landed. So that's important information. We know this. We also know that fire moves horizontally. It's going to move along. I think of it as sort of like water. If you just pour water down a hill, right, it's going to fan out until it can't go any further. When it comes to fire, it's sort of the same thing. It's going to keep just traveling to all the nearby combustibles until it comes to something that isn't combustible. Say in this photo of the mixed planting here, when it gets to that little stone dry wash bed or dry creek bed there, it'll probably maybe fizzle out. So that's important information. We also know that all plants burn. All plants burn. But that doesn't mean that all plants are bad. Our goal, really, for all of us is to create attractive and manageable plants or green belts around our house. Overcorrecting can really backfire. The house here that you see that's void of any plants is just a magnet for weeds and invasive plants to show up that are ultimately going to create more fuel, right? So I can't express enough the importance of plants. First of all, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for plants, but they provide so many benefits. The goal really is to find just the right balance between what you can maintain. I'm going to talk about that in a second, and what works in your garden. So the 2 words you want to have to seat are, first of all, maintain, and we're going to talk about planning in a second. And this is not a very sexy topic, but maintaining your garden is just so paramount in making it more fire resistant. So the first thing in terms of maintaining is just to clean up, right? Don't put things under your deck. Don't have the cardboard boxes next to your house, the newspapers, the broom, the loppers, whatever it might be, anything combustible, clean it up, get it away from the house. Water, be sure your irrigation system is in working order, right? Check it occasionally. You just want to be sure that it's going to do what it's supposed to do. You want to be sure that things are well pruned, and we're going to look at some examples in a little bit and see where maybe we want to trim some things back. And then the last maintenance item that we get a lot of questions about is mulch. So I'm going to provide just a little bit of detail for you on mulch. First is that within 5 feet of your house, the recommendation is to not use any combustible mulch, right? So look for attractive gravel or mulch or stone, gravel or stone, flagstone, anything that if an ember were to land would not be a problem. Beyond that, out 30 feet, you can start to introduce a little bit of wood chips if you like, but try and mix that up again with some non-combustible materials such as gravel, rocks, DG, stone, anything again where if an ember lands, it will fizzle, right? 30 feet from the house and beyond, go for the composted wood chips. It's fine. Avoid the fine stringy mulches and certainly no gorilla hair because it's has been shown in studies to be very flammable. I want to point out that you're going to hear this number 30 feet a couple of times, and it is a bit of a magic number. We know from studies that if a fire stays at least 30 feet away from your house, you're probably going to be okay. Your home will probably be okay. It's when it starts getting closer, that's when you have a problem. And again, the 0 to 5 is really paramount. We're going to talk about that in a second. And finally, when coming back to mulch, you really want to avoid mulching greater than 2 inches deep. That's because if you have it too deep, it can smolder underneath, and you won't know that it's smoldering, right? And then a fire could be starting someplace in your landscape and you just don't know about it. Okay, so maintenance is the one thing to keep in mind. Planning is the next. And when it comes to planning, we talk about things in 2 zones. The first is zone 0, and here's that 0 to 5 again. But keep that word 0 in your mind because that's an important word. Zones 1 and 2 are 5 to 30 feet. That's zone 1, actually, and then 30 feet and beyond. So really, in terms of landscaping practices, I really think of it as anything 5 feet and beyond from your house. We're going to talk about how to manage that in a second. Zone 0, the reason why the word 0 is so important here is your ultimate goal. And I'm going to use the word ultimate in quotes, but you ultimately want to have 0 combustible mulch, 0 combustible fencing or furniture, anything combustible near the house. You want 0 roof or gutter litter, 0 dead branches, 0 branches within 10 feet of a chimney or roof. And also 0 tall plants under eaves, because again, if an ember were to land on a tall plant, and we know that flames rise 2 to 3 times the height of a combustible surface, then it's up at your eaves. And when fire gets to your eaves, then you've got a problem. So, we know that it's almost impossible to go out and, okay, I'm going to like wipe everything out 0 to 5 feet from my house. It's just something to work toward. If you have some really low growing, in this, like for instance, in this photo, low growing succulent, well hydrated, very low plants, you're probably fine. But again, just bear in mind that word 0, as close as we can come to having as few combustibles as possible in that zone, the better. Zones 1 and 2. So here we go with 5 feet and beyond. Here, what I'd like to introduce is the whole idea of a bowl effect for a yard. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that the low, well-irrigated plants are closest to your house, so 5 feet and 5, 10, 15 feet. As you move away from the house, you can go with the larger shrubs and trees, and then 30 feet from the house, you can use, you can have larger trees, wood mulch, etc. So in other words, if your house is in the bottom of the bowl and you have low growing plants growing out from there and getting taller and taller, you've really created a bowl effect, which actually can be, really beautiful. It's a really practical way to landscape your home as well. And I realize it's more challenging on a hillside, which a lot of us live on hillsides, but it's just something to consider, keeping those low, well-irrigated plants closer to the house. Larger plants, such as this lovely manzanita here, which is so important in our California landscape, to keep those just out away from the house a little bit. And then one thing, hardscape as fuel breaks. See how this, underneath this tree, there happens to be these little pieces of stone. You know, that's a really helpful thing in a fire, because again, fire moves horizontally, right? And so if we have some of these stepping stones, gravel, dry creek beds, whatever we want to construct, it can help break up that flow of a fire. That also helps make all plants accessible for maintenance, right? It means you can step in there, get what you need done, trim what needs to be trimmed without tromping all over your plants or so forth. And it also creates, again, vertical and horizontal space definition, separation, as we will see a little bit more in a minute. And of course, it's really important to work with your neighbors, if at all possible, your whole neighborhood really, to get everyone to get on board. And I realize that this can be a really challenging aspect. But again, you know, of course, fire isn't selective. It's going to land where it's going to land, those embers. So it's something to bear in mind. So here's the question we get all the time. Is it going to be ugly? Is it going to be awful? What does this look like? Is it going to feel like I'm living on the surface of the moon, right? My best way of answering this is to consider how our gardens have already evolved. Not long ago, many of us were watering our gardens with great big sprayers, right? Great big pop-up sprayers, spraying lawns and so forth, wasting all sorts of water. And we asked ourselves the question, if I switch to drought-resistant plants, am I going to ruin my property values, right? If I go from this to this, am I going to suddenly destroy the value of my house? And I think it's pretty clear that we have evolved. We know the answer to that now. More often than not, homes that have a colorful mix of plants like this are not only are they using much less water, but they're more attractive, they're more beneficial, they're more eco-friendly, they invite pollinators, etc. And so we've really evolved in that direction. And we continue to evolve to the point where now we're asking ourselves, what makes this house, this landscape and this house more likely to burn than this house, right? Now, I'm not saying that the house on the right, that you need to go out and plant everything that's, you know, under, you know, a foot tall. And this looks like it's a pretty expansive property and lots of stone and so forth. But it's just, what I want to see is that we are really evolving. We're learning, right? We're so used to seeing, you know, foundation plantings, for instance, house, you know, plants planted right up against the house. And again, because of we know that 0 to 5 feet is so critical, we're just going to start moving away from that, right? So we're evolving. So now I'd like to show you a short video that we've recently produced that reiterates a lot of what I've just talked about, and we'll introduce just a couple of other little things, and then we'll look at some examples and go through and see what we would do in certain situations. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Faye Mark from the University of California Master Gardeners. Today I'm going to show you how to create and maintain a beautiful fire-smart landscape. Most traditional residential landscapes include foundation plantings and large trees and shrubs near the house. We're used to this look, but it turns out there are better ways of organizing your landscape that may help protect your home when a wildfire is burning nearby. We're often asked the question, what are the safest plants? Truth is, all plants burn. When it comes to fire-smart landscaping, it's much more important to consider where a plant is situated and how it is maintained than to assume some plants are better than others. The area within 5 feet of your house is the most critical. During a wildfire, embers can travel long distances. They tend to collect near the base of a home's exterior walls and will ignite anything that burns. To avoid that, we recommend minimizing anything that can burn in this area, including wood mulch and plants. This also means moving items like firewood, lumber, patio furniture, and garbage cans. Clearing this area of combustibles is like creating a force field that defends your home against fire. This is a whole new way to think about landscaping, since many of our homes have plantings right up against the walls and foundation. Just take it step by step. Start by removing plants in front of sliding glass doors or windows and remove any wood mulch. Next, focus on taller plants under eaves and vines climbing on your house. Low-growing or ground-hugging plants are less likely to cause a problem. Just be sure they're well hydrated and free of dead or dry material. Beyond 5 feet from the house, it's all about maintenance. The goal is to create defensible space that acts as a buffer between your house and your garden. It means looking at your garden with slightly different eyes. First, you want to interrupt the path of a fire by creating horizontal and vertical spacing between plants. That sounds complicated, but it's really not. You can create horizontal space by adding stepping stones, paths, patios, or walls. Any non-combustible surface between plantings helps stop the path of a fire. They can be as simple as gravel paths or as complicated as a low stone wall. The idea is to think of your planting beds as clumps or islands, with non-combustible surfaces providing separation to keep a fire from spreading along the ground. Vertical spacing is about stopping fire ladders. Fire ladders are when fire from lower plants spreads to nearby taller plants. If you stroll through your garden, are there places where shrubs are close to low tree canopies? If so, try to create space between them. Limb up trees and keep shrubs pruned. It's an easy and important way of interrupting a fire's path. The density of plantings provides another clue about how a fire could travel through your garden. You want to have a little breathing space in your garden. Consider breaking up hedges and large swaths of uninterrupted plantings to stop fire in its tracks. Another good rule of thumb is to keep low-growing plants closer to the house and taller plants away from the house. Second, you want to reduce your garden's fuel load. This is a fancy way of saying, keep your garden cleaned up. Anything that burns is fuel for a fire. Diseased, dried, or overgrown trees and shrubs have more fuel than well-pruned trees and shrubs. So do weeds, leaves, and pine needles in roof gutters, and debris that's gathered under decks. Keep things cleaned up to starve fire of fuel. As we like to say, don't be fuelish. Don't worry, you don't need to pick up every last leaf on the ground. Just be on the lookout for excess fuel, being extra vigilant the closer you are to your home or other built structures. Do you see plant material that would be useful for starting a campfire? If so, that's probably a good clue that it needs to be removed. Step into your garden and look up. Do you see tree branches near the roof line? Try to keep branches 10 feet from your roof or chimney, and definitely not touching the walls of your house. That way you'll avoid a buildup of needles and leaves on your roof and your rain gutters. Are there any diseased, dead, or dried shrubs or trees that need to be pruned or removed? Now look down. Are paths clear of debris? Do plants look healthy and hydrated? Plants that are properly hydrated are more resistant to fire and to pests and diseases. Even some drought-resistant plants may need a little supplemental water during extended dry periods. What about mulch? A layer of mulch improves soil quality, regulates soil temperature, reduces weeds, and helps retain water. Use non-combustible mulches like stone or gravel within 5 feet of any structure, including decks and sheds. Further out, choose larger composted wood chips and avoid applying mulch greater than 2 inches deep. Now let's talk about choosing plants, a favorite topic for master gardeners. We recommend plants that don't need much water, are easy to maintain, and that contribute to the ecological health of the surrounding area. We also suggest avoiding plants that are messy or invasive, like ivy and pampas grass, meaning they grow or spread so fast it's hard to keep them under control. Remember, you're trying to reduce your fuel load. Start by assessing your garden's growing conditions, such as sun exposure and climate, and then select plants that thrive in that environment. In other words, choose the right plant for the right place. That's it. Thanks for joining me, and congratulations on taking the first step towards creating a gorgeous, thriving, fire-smart landscape. Happy gardening!
Okay, great. So let's move along. Whoops, we're not moving along there. There we go. So now let's look at a couple examples of some houses where we could see that look like there's situations that we see all the time in Marin. So here's a house that has what I would characterize as some pretty typical front yard situations for us Marinites. And here, you know, a couple of things to note. This is right up in the 0 to 5 space, right? Whatever this shrub is, it's near the chimney and it's kind of near the house. So you might want to think about swapping that out for something else. You know, I like to think the situation is either you're going to move it or remove it, right? Move or remove. And in this situation, it might be a little bit too big to move, so you might want to remove it. I can't tell how close this is to this post here, but if it's too close, you know, that's something else. Keep it trimmed back, right? And then same idea on the other side. Can't tell how close it is, but if that's real close to the house, move it or cut it way down or consider a replacement, right? And then you can see how if you just took those things down, you would considerably reduce your fuel load around your house. Here's a situation. This is a house of a fellow master gardener, a beautiful big home on a big lot in Nevada where it gets baking hot, of course. And he has this had this large shrub or a couple of shrubs in here, and right next to his driveway. And it didn't seem like it was causing much of a problem until you see that what you're creating here, what's being created is a potential fire ladder. Because if a fire were to start, it's definitely going to go up into these trees, right? So it would go from the shrub to the trees, and then unfortunately it would be pretty darn close to the house. So that's not what you want. So in his case, what he did is he took out that evergreen shrubs. He took out those evergreen shrubs and he replaced it with this low-growing lupin, which is just beautiful. And so then you see you've created enough vertical space, right, between that tree that's up here someplace, and you've taken care of that problem. And I would say you've also made your landscape more beautiful. So here's a situation in someone's backyard, and they've done a nice job of creating this island effect, right, that we talk about in the video you just watched. And there are other islands in this garden out here and the backyard and so forth further out. There's nice use of mixed materials here in terms of hardscape. But the biggest problem in this garden is right here. And the reason why this is an issue is not only just because it's in the 0 to 5 space, but it's right in front of this sliding glass door. And that is a problem because windows and glass doors are more vulnerable to a fire. If an ember landed here, in this case, not only is it a problem in terms of height, you know, if it lands, the fire is going to go up 2 to 3 times the height of this shrub, and then it's going to be in your eaves conceivably. That's a problem. And it could enter or break that window, which is more vulnerable than a wall. So that's a problem. And I think they have this situation right here too, because this looks like it's a window. So, you know, this would be a situation where in these 2 little planting beds, you might just put some stone, or you'd put some super low growing, you know, water-filled succulents or something like that. Something that you would not have to worry about it catching on fire and busting through your window. Here's a backyard I could see in Marin. Nice little landing pad here. This little patio is great because any ember that lands there is going to fizzle, right? We've got the dreaded foundation plants, pretty skimpy, but nonetheless, we'd probably want to check that out and maybe remove those, and be sure that the wood mulch doesn't go up right to the house. Whoops. More importantly is we have this big tree here, and I would think we would probably want to take this tree back considerably, right? We'd want to take off all of this that's close to the house, get it at least 10 feet away from the house, right? That's the most important thing. As you see now, it is actually over the roof line, which is definitely a problem. And here's a front yard. This is a nice low growing mix of succulents. And look, they even added a little clump of stone there, which is a nice little fire break and actually adds a nice textural element. The one thing in this garden is these fortnight lilies. They're a little taller and they're right up against the house. You know, you could move those out a little bit. You could just move them out here. You could move them into the backyard, or you could just replace them or just leave them. Consider, you know, maybe just put some of this stone right up against the house again, because that vulnerable 0 to 5 area is so critical. And I would also look at these branches back here. I can't tell how close it gets to the house back there, but you might want to consider, in this case, looking closely at that area. You might have to take off a branch or prune it back. Again, just to get that little force field around the perimeter of your home. And here's a situation that we see often. And as you saw in the video, we really encourage giving your landscape a little breathing room. So what I like to envision here are two things. The first are probably taking a couple of things out that are creating probably a little bit of excess fuel or fuel ladders. This could catch onto this, or whoops, I meant to go to this tree, right? And this large clump here might be better served if you just maybe took one out, right? Just give it a little breathing room, maybe one or two others, it wouldn't really matter. But also, I would love to see a little stone pathway or stepping stones or something in here that would not only make it look really cool, but also allow the gardener, the homeowner, to easily access all these plants for maintenance, right? You could step right down through your garden and make it easy on yourself. And I think it would not only add a really nice element, but it would definitely make it more fire resistant. And finally, I really love this photo because those of us who are used to having mulch, wood mulch right up to our house can be a little befuddled on what to do. And I think this is a beautiful example of using a different non-combustible material as a mulch, in this case, these lovely blue stones. And it contrasts so nicely with this walkway. So it's just sort of a nice study in hardscape, but again, it's killing two birds with one stone. It's helping you increase the fire resistance of your house, and it's making your entry really lovely. So what I'd like to reiterate, because we're always asked about plants specifically, circling back here, is that it's not what you plant, but it's where you plant it, getting back to the zones and so forth, and it's how you take care of it, right? It's planning and it's maintenance. And that's it for today. This final slide is all the different ways you can get in touch with the Master Gardeners. If anyone is interested, if you hold your phone up to your screen right now and just click on the phone, excuse me, click on the camera, but don't take a photo, something will open up and you can sign up for our leaflet. It's a free e-newsletter emailed quarterly. I actually happen to be the editor of that publication. I promise we will not pepper you with too many things. It only comes out 4 times a year, and there's a lot of good information in it. So that's it for me. So
did you want to take questions, Marie, or?
Yeah, for sure. Should I go ahead and stop share now?
You can if you want to. You can leave it up. But if you have questions, if you have questions, use the chat or the Q&A, and then I'll relay your questions to Marie, and she can answer them. Did anybody have any questions?
I think I will need to get out of sharing then.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Here we go. Okay. So where are those questions?
So nothing's come in so far.
Okay.
But your camera's off, so we're just looking at a Garden Smart. Also, I forgot to do the poll. So if we want to know how many of you are actually Marin Master Gardeners or in the Marin Master Gardener program, if you could fill out the poll real quick, that'd be awesome.
Here, I can go back and put this other screen on then. At least it's a little bit more interesting to look at. And if folks do want to sign up or jot down the contact information. Oh, I see. So this comes up. Great.
Can you tell us more about importance of native plants, Marie?
Native plants? Sure. Native plants are important for a host of reasons. And one of the most important is because they've co-evolved with all the most important insects and pollinators and so forth in our environment, right? And this is one of the key reasons why invasive plants are so damaging, is because they not only look ugly and create tons of fuel for fire, but they snuff out native plants. And when we snuff out native plants, then we start messing with the balance of good bugs and bad bugs. And that in turn can lead to problems with invasive plants encroaching. And again, it's just this horrible circular situation then, where we're just always creating more fuel. And native plants also, you know, by definition, many of them use low or no water once they're established. You know, they also give us our sense of place. You know, think how strange it would be if you went for a walk on Mount Tam and suddenly it was filled with, you know, petunias or roses, right? They're beautiful plants. They're absolutely gorgeous plants, don't get me wrong, but they're not our native. They're not our look. They're not our plant community, right? So,
Okay, so we got more questions coming in. Can you discuss cypress and fire threat?
cypress and what?
And fire threat?
Fire threat. Excuse me, I couldn't understand you. Can hear you. Cypress, you know, again, I go back to all plants burn. One of the reasons why cypress, juniper, Italian cypress, why they've gotten a bad name is not because of the plant itself, frankly. It's peek inside those plants. They're often filled with dead, dying, brown material, right? They're very challenging plants to maintain with the maintenance standards that we just talked about, right? They create a lot of fuel. And so, yeah, it might be a good idea to take those out if you don't think you can maintain them to that degree. And I have to admit, it would be very challenging. But those aren't the only plants like that, right? There are other ones that you really have to stay on, or there are plants that create, say, tons of litter. The classic one that we always go to is eucalyptus, right? Eucalyptus, whether you're a fan or not of eucalyptus, they drop a ton of leaves all the time, right? So if you keep those cleaned up all the time and so forth, it's less of an issue. If you let those pile up 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, then you're probably creating a situation that's a little bit too fuelish, as we'd like to say.
Okay, and then I have actually a couple people asked the same question. If you rake, weed, prune, and irrigate, are you done? And how often do you need to do this?
If you rake, is that what you said?
Yeah, rake, weed, prune, and irrigate, are you done? And how often do I need to do this?
I would say yes. And, you know, one of the things that we provide as Master Gardeners are quarterly chores, you know, sort of a to-do list for home gardeners. And so I would encourage everyone to go on our website and look at those. But yeah, keeping things raked up and pruned properly and away from the house and so forth, and not having a lot of plants encroaching on your roof and the side of your house, as we just reviewed. Yeah, that goes so far in terms of fire resistance. It's really important.
Okay, and then what if you have trees or bushes outside of the 5-foot zone, but their branches extend within the 5-foot zone?
Yeah, this is a common issue. We're all dealing with this now, right? We're all evolving toward taking some of those branches out if you can, right? they all become decision points. We're all dealing with these same things in our gardens. Believe me, all the master gardeners are too, because we're all plantaholics. So we're all figuring this out. But yeah, I would say if at all possible, try and trim them back so that they're at least 5 feet away from the house. And if you find that you're constantly having to maintain something to get it to stay there, probably a good clue that maybe it might be time to consider replacing whatever it is that you're constantly having to cut back.
Okay, so if I wanted to find someone to help me, where would I go?
Come to the Master Gardeners. We can give you, oh, you mean specific names of people? Specific names. You know, we don't give out actual names of contractors or landscape professionals or so forth, but you know, this is something where chances are if you ask around in your neighborhood, you can find somebody who would be qualified. I would also encourage everyone to pay attention to their chipper days, because there have been all these you know, increased number of chipper days where we can take as much as we want and you know, and have it chipped for free. So this is a big cost savings for many of us.
Okay, so the other one, someone asked, is this also pertains to wood fences and deck lines? Yes?
Yes, and this is another thing. Speaking of evolving, many of us have fences and decks and so forth right up to our houses, and those are combustible surfaces. And so again, as we evolve away from this, you know, the next time you want to replace all or part of your deck, you know, you could think of something else for that 5 feet between the house and your where the deck extends. I know people who are changing their wood gates and wooden fences and putting in metal for you know, like a few you know, a few 8-foot sections, say, something like that. So again, it's an evolution, but those things do absolutely fall into the combustible category. Same with arbors, right? Sometimes we'll have arbors that are little overhangs that are attached to the house. And sometimes not only are those made of wood, but then they have something really, you know, lovely often growing over them. And we want to try and move away from that, right?
So the next question is, we have large redwoods that grow within 10 to 15 feet of the house and structures. My sense is most towns will not let homeowners remove these trees. Are towns considering this differently with a higher wildfire risk?
Yeah, that's a tough question, you know, and I can't speak with any level of authority on all of the ordinances and so forth, and they vary by town, so it'd be probably a dangerous thing to do anyway. Yeah, it's a complicated question, and you would have to contact your city officials and the fire officials to find out what your options are. Redwoods, you know, we're unbelievably fortunate to live in a place where we have these just spectacular trees, the tallest living things on earth, right? They're just tremendous. And I will tell you that some of them have bark that are like, you know, a foot thick or whatever, and in a fire, it will, you know, it'll pass them by, right? The trees will not succumb because of this resistance, but it doesn't change the situation where if branches and so forth were to catch on fire and they're right next to your house, it certainly can threaten your home. But this is a situation where you really need to work with those with your fire officials and your city officials to see what you can do. Often you can just cut the branches back a lot or limb them up a little bit, but it really takes somebody who knows what they're doing.
Okay, and then any advice on eradicating bamboo? Firewise came through and removed ours on street side, but it grew back within weeks.
Yeah, bamboo, you know, there are two types of bamboo. There's running bamboo, which can definitely be a challenge, and there's clumping bamboo. Clumping bamboo is a little bit more well-behaved. It stays in a clump, as the name suggests. You know, it goes back to that maintenance question again, right? If you maintain it, keep it cleaned up, keep keep the dead and dying material out of it, keep it well watered and all that, it's going to be like any other plant, right? If you let it run through your neighbor's yard and the neighbor beyond, and let all the dying, everything build up there, then you're creating a fire hazard. So I would really, it's really a maintenance issue. And eradicating bamboo is extremely challenging. You can sometimes put a barrier down around it that will stop the rhizomes from continuing. So that's something to consider. You have to go down a couple of feet, a few feet to make that happen, to put a barrier all the way around.
Okay, and then someone asked, I'm using stone for mulch. Should we remove the old mulch to the soil level and then replace the mulch with?
Yes. Yeah, if you're gonna say you want to change, swap out your wood mulch, say in that 0 to 5 zone, yeah, rake out the old mulch, use it hopefully 30 feet away from your house, someplace way beyond the perimeter, and then put stone or flagstone or whatever you want down right in that 5 feet space. Yeah, and it often looks really nice.
Okay, another question is, what about those of us who live on the hillsides and are surrounded by decks? What type of plants? I guess they're asking what type of plants to plant or to grow.
Yeah, I assume this means what kind of plants to grow. And I would just go back to the same, just circle back. Again, it's not what you plant, but where you plant it and how you take care of it, whether it's on a deck, right? And again, decks by definition are combustible surfaces, so you know that those are going to be a little bit more at risk. But do what you can to keep the 0 to 5 as free of combustibles as possible, and then plant the things you love. Plant the things that will grow to the size you want and not create a maintenance nightmare for you. That's the best way I can put it. And this sounds like it's really complicated, and I will tell you, we have some, if you go to the Master Gardener site, we have some plant lists that are really handy. Right on the home page, you can see on the menu, it'll say choose plants, and click on that, and we have all sorts of different plant lists that you can use of plants that are found in nurseries and that should not cause lots of maintenance headaches.
Okay, and then is it mandatory to remove mature juniper bushes next to one's house?
You know what, again, this is going to get into city ordinances, and I don't know what those all are from city to city. I remember that there was something passed in Mill Valley where everything was going to have to be taken out in the 0 to 5. And that did include juniper, but let me give you an example. Juniper is such a great whipping boy, right? Because again, it's the plant. If you look inside any juniper shrub, what you're going to see 99.9% of the time is a bunch of dead and dying brown twigs, right? If you were going to start a campfire in your yard, the first thing you would do is you would go to your juniper shrub, snap off a few of those branches, and light her up. So the question is, if that juniper shrub is right up against your house, it could be juniper, it could be coffeeberry, it could be pittosporum, it could be anything. But if it has all that dead and dying material right there, not only is it right in your 0 to 5 space, but it's just dried material waiting to go up in flames, right? So it's bad. Now, let's move it out. Let's say it's 30, 35, 40 feet from your house. Is it as much of a risk? No, right? Because then it's beyond the scope of where we've studied, and we know that it's less of a risk. Whether or not you like juniper is a different story, or whether or not you want to spend the time to maintain it such that you're going to reduce that level of dryness inside. That's the real question, right? That plant is so prone to doing that you may want to choose something else. So just to make it easier on yourself in terms of maintenance.
Okay, and then I have rose bushes planted against my house and next to my windows. Are these okay?
Yeah, you know, that's a tough one, isn't it? Because I know we all love what we all, in fact, many of us have sentimental value to, sentimental attachment to many plants. In a perfect world, any plant, including a rose plant in front of windows, is not the best choice. One good thing about roses is that in the winter, when they're, you know, when you prune them way back and so forth, you can often move them. Maybe this would be a time this next winter to consider putting them someplace else and finding an alternative for under your window, whether that's a, you know, some low growing item or stone or something like that, again, just to keep that 0 to 5 clean. In fact, I will tell you, the photo that we looked at, remember, of the big shrub of the master gardener who lives in Novato, who had the fire ladder situation. I remember him saying that when he made all these changes to his house, that he and his wife, he said to his wife, you know, we've got to move those roses away from the house, away from the windows. So he was in the same situation as you, and they ended up just moving them out where you can still enjoy them, but they're just not as close to your house.
Okay, and then someone asked, when I go into my garden today, what are the top 3 things I should start working on?
Great question. I would say the first thing is to clear as many combustible items in the 0 to 5 zone as you can. And that means not only things maybe planted in the ground, maybe you can cut them way back or replace them with something non-combustible or very, very, very low growing and well watered. But it also includes cleaning up. That would be the second thing. Move any brooms, move any out of that 0 to 5, any tools with wooden handles, any buckets, your garbage cans, doormats, anything that has that can ignite, get that out of there. And then the third thing would be trimming back, right? Just reducing your fuel load so that trees and shrubs are kept in check and not growing out of hand. Oh, you know what, let me add to that. That is particularly important wherever fire crews would access your property, right? In an emergency, you want to be sure you can easily get away from your house and using your evacuation route. You want to be equally sure that firefighters can access your property, right? And so if you have a bunch of overgrown trees or shrubs or something impeding their access, that is a real problem. So that goes in the category of keeping things pruned back. Be sure they can access your property.
Okay, and then this last question is, does the Marin Master Gardeners have a list of plants that might mitigate the fire danger?
We have lists of plants that do really well in Marin County. So we have lists of plants for people who live in foggy areas. We have lists of plants for people who live in hot summer areas. We have lists of plants for people who maybe want to attract, you know, birds and hummingbirds and butterflies and so forth, or live on hillsides, or who live with deer. We cover all those bases. And again, we don't identify any plants as being safer than others, right? Because again, just to reiterate, it's not what the plant is, it's where it is and how you take care of it. That's really the key. I cannot say that strongly enough. That's really a really important thing to keep in mind.
Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions. This is your last chance, guys, to put something in the chat box or the Q&A.
All right.
Okay, well, I would like to thank you, Marie, for being here today and spending your morning with us. We'll look forward to having maybe another workshop in the future with you, but I want to thank everybody who attended today. Don't forget, I'll be sending out an email with the survey for the Marin Master Gardeners, as well as the links to the recording for today and the upcoming events. But again, thank you all for coming, and enjoy your weekend.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, be sure, everyone, I really encourage you to go to the Marin Master Gardener website. In fact, you'll see right on the homepage the video that I showed today. and you can get right to the FireSafe, FireSmart web page, which has all sorts of information and in more detail.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank
See
you.
you next time. Thanks, Marie.
Thank you, Franklin.